Okay, so if a customer in America pays you $100, how much of it do you actually get to keep? Because if you're on Stripe, the answer might surprise you. The headline rate looks reasonable, but international payments come with extra fees on top, and once they stack up, you're paying over 5% on a single transaction. Compare that to AIrwallex, where the same payment settles into a USD wallet, no conversion, and it costs just 3.15%. On 100K a year in international revenue, that's roughly £2,000 back in your business just from switching your payment processor. Now, before we go any further, this video is sponsored by AIrwallex. They asked if I'd make a comparison with Stripe, but they have no editorial control, they don't get to approve it, and what you're watching is my honest analysis of the fees and the facts. So let's start there, with the fees, because they're black and white, and the differences are bigger than most people realize. Stripe is a payment processor. You plug it in, it takes payments, and you pay a fee per transaction. AIrwallex does that too, but it's a much broader platform. And if you want the full picture on everything they offer, I've done a separate in-depth guide which I'll link below. But for this one, we're focused on one question. When it comes to accepting payments, processing transactions, and managing your business's money across borders, how do these two compare? Well, in terms of cost, on standard consumer cards, so Visa and MasterCard, the two are close, although AIrwallex is generally cheaper. The business and corporate card line is worth mentioning because the difference is significant. If someone pays you with a company Visa or MasterCard, Stripe charges 1.9%, while AIrwallex charges just 1.3%. Amex is also worth calling out because this is one area where Stripe actually wins. Stripe charges 1.5% while AIrwallex charges 2.4%. So if a meaningful chunk of your customers pay with Amex, factor that in. And on international cards, so your customers in Europe, the US, Australia, wherever, the base rates between the two are close, but they don't tell the full story because they're not factoring in currency conversion. And that's where things get a lot more interesting, and we'll come to that in a moment. So let's put it into a real scenario. Say your business earns £100,000 a month in revenue. If we split that across a mix of payment types, we can see what each platform could actually cost. And I think it's realistic to say that most customers will use standard cards like Visa or MasterCard, with Amex and EEA making up a far smaller share. And across this mix, AIrwallex does come out ahead. Of course, that could change. More Amex customers may favor Stripe, but if you have more corporate cards or international customers, that gap widens further in favor of AIrwallex. So I already mentioned that currency conversion is where things get pretty interesting. And this part can cost businesses a lot of money because it really isn't that obvious. Now, Stripe discloses a 2% conversion fee which sits underneath the headline rate and applies when a conversion is required. The issue is that on Stripe, conversions are the default. So to avoid them, and this is my actual dashboard, you have to manually add a settlement currency for every one you want to hold. And Stripe says that if you want to receive payouts, you'll need to add a separate bank account. That's fine for one or two currencies, but imagine at scale, right? It's just gonna create more work for you. Although if you don't do it, then the conversion fees will stack up pretty fast. Consider a customer paying in euros, so they're using an EEA card. That 2.5% base rate becomes closer to 4.5% due to the currency conversion fee. A US customer paying in dollars goes from 3.25% to over 5%. So if you haven't set those settlement accounts up properly, you could be paying significant fees without even realizing. And look, we don't need to run another scenario. I think it's pretty clear that if you're not careful, currency conversion fees can do real damage to your bottom line. With AIrwallex, the multi-currency wallet is built in. When you're paid in dollars, it lands and sits there. No separate bank account, no manual setup, and no automatic conversion. And if you do want to convert, AIrwallex charges between 0.5% and 1% depending on the currency, which is significantly cheaper than Stripe's flat 2%. But honestly, Stripe was built primarily as a payment processor, and when you compare it to AIrwallex on international finance, it's just a totally different ballgame. And nowhere is that difference more obvious than when you look at what each platform offers as a business account. Stripe has something called treasury. It exists in the dashboard, and you can store funds, open a local account, convert currencies, and issue cards. But it's primarily built for the US market, and for standard UK business accounts, it's pretty restricted. You get 3 currencies and a domestic account, so you just get an account number and a sort code. On the other hand, AIrwallex gives you instant bank accounts set up in over 70 countries, and you can send money to 200, with 120 of those going through local payment rails rather than SWIFT. So that means faster transfers and lower costs. You can also earn interest or yield on balances, so any idle cash that you have can actually earn a return. AIrwallex already offers this across the US, EEA, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Stripe, I believe, is launching this later in the year. And if you're running multiple companies, which is becoming increasingly common for founders, AIrwallex lets you manage all of them from a single login. Stripe doesn't have that yet. I can see why people would choose Stripe Treasury if they're already deep in the ecosystem, and it does a basic job. But if you just take a look at the dashboards and compare the two, or even this table, it's not really in the same conversation as AIrwallex. 3 currencies versus 25, a domestic account versus local bank details in 70 countries. It's not really a fair comparison. AIrwallex isn't just ahead here, it's a completely different product. And that brings us to checkout. The actual moment someone decides to spend money with your business. Get it right and they sail through, get it wrong and they abandon the cart and you've lost the sale. And this is an area where, until very recently, Stripe had a clear advantage. But that's just changed. So Stripe have a product called Link, recently rebranded as Onelink, which is essentially a one-click checkout network. If a customer has used Stripe before on any other website, not just yours, their payment details are already saved. And according to Stripe, this lifts conversion by up to 7% for returning customers. But AIrwallex has just launched their own version. It's called Airi. It works in the same way. So shoppers save their payment details and can then check out in one click across any merchant that has Airi enabled. And according to AIrwallex, merchants using this are seeing up to 14% higher conversion with checkouts that's 3 times faster than standard card payments. The difference between the two is what happens after the payment. With Stripe's Onelink, it still settles through their standard processing. With Airi, it's built directly onto AIrwallex payments, which means you settle like for like directly into the multi-currency wallet. So if a US customer pays in dollars, that revenue lands in your USD balance with no forced conversion. That's a meaningful advantage. On the checkout itself, so payment links, hosted pages, embedded checkout, both platforms cover the essentials, and I don't think either have a meaningful edge. Where AIrwallex pulls ahead is payment method coverage. Stripe supports around 100 local payment methods globally. AIrwallex supports over 160, including more than 20 that aren't available on Stripe. Plus, they have more international choice for buy now, pay later providers. There's also something less obvious. AIrwallex processes payments locally in more markets, which means transactions look less like foreign payments to your customer's bank. This matters because cross-border transactions have a higher decline rate. Banks are more cautious with them. So if the payment is being processed locally, it looks domestic, and that reduces the chance of a legitimate payment being declined. So on checkout, I think both platforms are now competitive on the one-click conversion tools, but AIrwallex wins on global payment method coverage, local payment processing, and crucially, multi-currency settlement on every transaction. And if you're running any kind of subscription or recurring revenue model, there's another part of this comparison worth looking at. So if you have a SaaS product or a membership model or any kind of subscription, both platforms have a billing product, but they work quite differently. Stripe billing has been around longer and handles complex use cases. Say you're charging customers based on usage, or you need sophisticated logic for retrying failed payments and managing lapsed subscriptions. If your billing model is complicated, Stripe has probably already built the feature you need. AIrwallex billing covers the core use cases really well. So recurring charges, trials, subscription schedules, and invoicing, these are all actually free. And for most businesses, I think that's going to be enough. But where they have a clear advantage is cost. Stripe charges an additional 0.7% on every renewal through their billing product. And that's on top of the standard transaction fee. AIrwallex charges 0.5%, which I know may sound small, right? But on 100K in monthly recurring revenue, that's a £200 difference every month. And for international subscription businesses, AIrwallex obviously has another advantage. When a subscriber pays you in euros or dollars, that revenue settles into the corresponding currency wallet without being converted. With Stripe, as we saw earlier, if you haven't set it up right, that automatic 2% conversion fee applies to every single renewal. So Stripe wins on billing feature depth, but AIrwallex wins on cost and multi-currency handling. So I think Stripe wins this on billing feature depth. It's the more mature product, but AIrwallex wins on cost and multi-currency handling. So far, everything we've covered has been about online payments, but for a lot of businesses, payments don't just happen online. And historically, managing in-person and online payments has meant dealing with two completely separate systems, two sets of reporting, and often two different providers. That's the problem that both Stripe and AIrwallex have a solution for, and it's worth talking about, particularly because AIrwallex has just launched something new. Stripe Terminal is the more established product. There's a proper range of hardware from a £49 basic reader all the way up to a £229 smart terminal, plus a tap to pay option if you don't want hardware at all. It integrates cleanly with Stripe's online payments, and for UK businesses with a single location, I think it does the job pretty well. AIrwallex POS launched in April 2026, so this is quite new, and their soft POS turns any compatible smartphone or tablet into a terminal with no hardware at all. But with AIrwallex, the real distinction is where it sits. Rather than having a standalone terminal product, it lives inside the same platform that's already handling your online payments, your FX, your cards, and your transfers. So in-store and online revenue lands in the same place, reconciled in the same dashboard, in the same multi-currency wallet. And where AIrwallex goes even further is on payment methods, accepting WeChat, Alipay, UnionPay, alongside standard cards, which Stripe Terminal doesn't support. And for software platforms or SaaS businesses that want to offer in-person payments to their own customers, AIrwallex handles all the compliance and licensing in the background, so you can embed POS into your product without building payment infrastructure from scratch. So on UK cards, AIrwallex is slightly cheaper, but on EEA and international, Stripe Terminal is actually less expensive for in-person payments right now. That's the opposite of what we've seen everywhere else in this video. So it's a fair point in Stripe's favor. If the bulk of your payments are local to the UK and in person, then the UK rate will matter most. But if you're taking a lot of international cards in person, Stripe Terminal currently has the edge. And Stripe Terminal, to be fair, is the more established product. There's no doubt. But if you're already using AIrwallex for your online payments, I think the appeal of having in-store payments in the same platform, so the same dashboard, same wallet, same reporting, I think it's a clear advantage. And that's ultimately what AIrwallex POS is built around. Now, before we get to the verdict, two practical things are worth knowing. If a customer disputes a payment on Stripe, you're charged £20 just for receiving it and another 20 to contest it, and you're only refunded if you win. AIrwallex takes a more proactive approach with tools that can flag issues before they escalate into a full chargeback, but if it does, they typically charge £15 per incident. On support, if you want a dedicated account manager on Stripe, that starts at around £1,400 a month. On AIrwallex, it comes with the Accelerate plan at £999. So after everything we've covered, here's where I land. AIrwallex is the better platform. The fee structure is more competitive across almost every card type. The multi-currency wallet removes a 2% conversion cost that Stripe charges by default, and the breadth of what you get is just so much greater. International money transfers, card management, expense management, business accounts in over 60 markets, and now in-person payments, all on a single platform. Honestly, Stripe can't compete with that. Traditionally, businesses would run a financial platform and bolt Stripe on top for payments. With AIrwallex, you don't actually need to do that anymore, it's just all there. But Stripe does have a few clear advantages. If you're a purely domestic UK business with a lot of Amex transactions, their pricing works in your favor. If your billing model is genuinely complex, say you're charging based on usage or you need sophisticated logic for failed payments, Stripe billing is more mature. And if you need business financing, Stripe Capital offers funding products that AIrwallex simply doesn't have yet. And to be fair, there's something to be said for Stripe's track record. They've been around longer and they process an enormous amount of money, but you need to be prepared to pay for that experience, because ultimately, I think you'll end up paying more in fees than you would with AIrwallex. So if you're thinking about signing up for AIrwallex, I've put a link in the description box. That is an affiliate link, so by using it, you'll be supporting myself and the channel. And let me know if you have any questions about either provider, and if you'd like to learn more about how AIrwallex compares to Revolut Business, including payment processing fees, then check out this video. See you there.